listening to Zap Night, a video game review podcast. Join your hosts as we review video games from all systems and all genres. Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Zap Night. I'm your host, Danny.
I'm your co-host, Kaylie.
Kaylie, how's it going?
Good, good.
This is episode 69. Today we are talking about Bee Simulator, but before we get there, let's talk about Final Fantasy VIII a little bit. How far do you think you are in Final Fantasy VIII?
I'm probably like just a tiny bit under halfway.
I think I'm at the halfway point, maybe a little over the halfway point. I am on disc 3, but like just barely. So, but I fully anticipate being able to beat it by the end of October. It's just, I think we set the bar too high to beat it for this podcast episode, and we couldn't quite make it. But it's all right, because we got a chance to play Bee Simulator, and we're still working on Final Fantasy VIII. That will, I feel very confident in saying September 1st will be, not September 1st, right? It's November 1st. Should be Final Fantasy VIII. So, yeah. So this month we were playing, well, for this episode, we're talking about Bee Simulator. Me and Kaylie sat down, we played the entirety of the main storyline and then a little bit of the extra stuff just to get a full feel for the game. And I feel like we did. I feel like I don't know, what did we put, like 3-4 hours into the game?
If that.
Yeah, somewhere around there. So Bee Simulator was developed by Big Ben, and it was released on the Switch, the PS4, the Xbox One, and PC. We have the Switch version. That's what we played. It was released in 2019. There is no Wikipedia page for it yet, so I don't know the exact date without doing extensive research to figure it out, but it's not that big of a deal. 2019 was when it was released. So story-wise, basically you're taken through the life of a bee. When I saw this game, my mind instantly went to it was going to be like managing hives and managing like pollen intake, more stat-based than it was gameplay-based. And that's not at all what this game was. This game is very much you're a bee and you're trying to help provide for your
colony
hive, right? So the story, you're a bee who hatches out of its little bee nest, and you're given the role of gatherer.
Pollen collector.
Like that. And your goal is to go out to the world and collect pollen. And that's what it is for the majority of the game. And then winter slowly starts creeping in, so the colony is demanding more and more pollen for you to bring back to the hive to store it for winter. After winter hits, the area that you're in, the humans come in and they start cutting down limbs of the tree that your hive has made a home out of. And they see this as a threat, as they would. So the queen orders a group of bees to go out to look for a new home. However, your bee character is not allowed to go and do this, but you do anyway. And when you get back, the queen is quite angry and orders you to not do anything, to only, worry about the colony. It's kind of set that way until they start smoking out the tree or something like that. And the queen orders everyone to go out into the world and find a new place. Like, you have to go and look. So then your bee character goes out and finds a spot in the roof of a boathouse. You go back to the queen and report the boathouse as a possible candidate. And about that time, the humans come in and start to physically tear down the tree. So the queen orders a mass evacuation of the tree that you're in, the hive, and you all gather up all of the baby bees, all of the larvae, and carry them to the new home. and you guys set up shop, and the day is saved, and the end.
That's it.
Does that about sum it up, Kaylie? Do you feel like that's pretty accurate?
I mean, that's the life of a bee, am I right?
I guess.
Am I right? Am I right?
The whole time you are being attacked by wasps, and you kind of have to do this like fight simulation thing, which is really like a rhythm game I would say a rhythm game is pretty accurate, where you got to hit the buttons at the right time. And also you have to do like these dances. This is more gameplay, but you got to do these dances to represent giving directions to other bees. And it's supposed to be like real world bees do these things sort of deal, except now I'm not a bee. I don't know bees. Okay. I know of bees, honeybees, and I have a general understanding of what they do, but I was under the impression that honeybees collected nectar and brought nectar back to the colony, not pollen. That pollen was just... pollen is on the flowers anyway. While they're collecting the nectar, they pick up the pollen and distribute it to other flowers. That's different from what I understood bees to do, but that's how they represented it in this game. So whether that's accurate or not, that's how they represented bees. Is that they went out and they gather pollen for the hive.
They probably just do both. Like,
maybe, but I was under the impression that the nectar is the sweet part of the flower, and that's what they're pulling down and then taking back to the hive to fill, their honeycomb with the nectar of the flowers, and it sweet, I don't know, whatever. I don't know. I'm not a bee person.
Okay. Perfect.
So what did you give it for story, Kaylie?
I gave it a 5 out of 10.
Okay.
What'd you get?
I gave it a 7.
What?
Yeah, I gave it a 7. I mean, it was a story. It was laid out fairly well. It didn't have any like overly strange moments in it. It was very simple, but it was very straightforward.
Sure. I mean, that's fair.
I mean, there was no, no decisions that impacted the gameplay. There was no twist at the end. It was very straightforward.
It was just basic.
It gave you a reason to be a bee. Like, and there was some, there was the conflict of the tree being taken down, and you kind of felt bad for the bees because, they built this tree a home, and here now the humans are taking it down because the bees have pretty much killed this tree. So there's a part in the game where the humans come in and they start smoking the hive up. And my interpretation of this was that the humans were going to collect the bees and move them to like a bee hive, like a beekeeper's hive. And then everything would be good. Except that's not what happened. Instead, the bees fled the hive and went to the boathouse, and now they're building a huge nest in the boathouse to actually cause more of a problem for humans.
That's what I thought too. I assumed. Well, at first I assumed that it didn't make sense because, it kind of made sense because the tree was near people, but it really wasn't as much as the boathouse. But like I wish they would have explained or had some part on the humans' half of why they were doing the tree stuff. Or remember the part with the guy in the drone?
Yeah, that was.
Cool, but like we had no idea why.
Yeah, there was no context behind that. It was okay. So at one point during the story, there is a noise outside the hive, and you go out to investigate as the bee, and you find that there's this drone flying around, and it's a very small drone about the size of you, the bee, and you start chasing it down. Well, as you're chasing it down, you find out that a human is controlling this drone, and you basically are just like, this is neat, and you go back to the hive, and you're like, yeah, it was just a human, and that's it.
No. It was worse than that. They acknowledged that it was just I forget what they called it, but they knew it was a bee impersonator. Like they knew it was like some kind of a drone.
It was like
they were using words that they should not know because they are bees.
Agreed. They were like, oh, it's just a drone. And the rest of the bees were like, oh, that's it?
Mechanics. And they were cool with it. They're like, oh, it's not real, so this is fine. And like the guy controlling the drone, that there was no reason. He was just doing it because, like, why?
Yeah, I don't know. They really didn't give any context to that other than, I mean, perhaps he was a researcher doing research on bees, but still, they left it at a very odd point with,
it was
with
just
how the
weird.
humans are.
I don't know.
I wonder if the human aspect of it was more of the dangers of
a bee.
No, more like the dangers of humans interacting with the bees. Like, for example, the bees were in the nest, they were in this tree, and the humans came in and chopped down the tree. And instead of, the bees finding a different tree, the bees ended up finding the next best thing, which is the house.
Right.
So maybe it's more of a warning to us, the humans, of what's going on.
Well,
in the real world, bees would be like that. They would just be like, well, I mean, if you're going to take down my tree, I'm going to find whatever's nearby,
In the beginning, they kind of touch on the fact that bees are dying out and stuff, and you see the pesticides and everything in the intro.
Mm-hmm.
So, it makes sense. Like, he probably was some kind of a researcher researching that colony or something, but I feel like even if they didn't want to address it, they could have put, like, some kind of text on his shirt, on his computer, just a little information, like, oh, this is a researcher, this is just some random guy in the park with the tiny bee drone.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm a little sad you could sting people, but, like, they wouldn't.
Yeah, that is weird. Do you feel like there's anything else about story? I mean, it's really there's not much to talk about for story.
Not really. I mean, we can probably touch on it a tiny bit as we go on, but there's really not much else. No.
So graphics, I gave it an 8 for graphics, mainly because everything was so cute, and I feel like they did decent on detail, even though it was the detail itself wasn't. The graphics themselves weren't detailed, but there was a lot of details. Does that make any sense?
I do. I gave it a 6.
Okay.
I loved the cutscenes, like the little 2D papery look.
Yeah, I liked that too.
Yeah, that was really cute. The beginning, like your hive and stuff, and like the foresty areas, like it was beautiful. It really was beautiful. When you're out collecting pollen, the overworld, I don't know what else you want to call it, the outside world, I feel like fell flat really bad. The people were really not that well. It gave me some old unfinished PC vibe. I don't know how to explain it. The people really didn't have much animation to them, I guess. And then
really, the same could be said for the bees too.
Yes. Well, then it was so cute. Like, they included really cute details. Like, at the bottom of the nest is this lost ring and an eggshell for some reason. But then they had cupcakes, and they used the same 2 cupcakes and lollipops and stuff. The same set of food that your bees can eat everywhere.
The same graphics for each one.
I thought the different modes that you could go into as a bee when you're hyper focusing on flowers was pretty cool. But I don't know. I wanted to score it higher, but I feel like it's in the middle, and so I gave it a 5 out of 10. Like it's just kind of in the middle.
That's fair. So my take on the graphics, you're absolutely right saying that everything is kind of flat. And that's very true. And the humans that you interact with, they don't have any animation to them. Like, if they're in a group of friends talking, they're just a group of friends talking. You can go up and sting them, and they may have a sound, but there is no animation to try and swat you away, or there is no danger to you as the player bee. It's just you go up and you sting these, very EA Sims look of the characters, like old school Sims too, not even like the newer ones. But in some of the areas, the tiny detail was really nice. For example, when we were playing The City, you could go down and there was a trash bin and there was a pizza box with a pizza in it. There was like a little coffee cup with some coffee in it and it looked gross.
That was the extra stuff. They didn't even have the decency to put that in the actual game part.
I agree. They should have done that. But because you're the small, tiny bee, everything has to be scaled to that when you're walking around on areas. And you really feel like you're that tiny. Like, you do feel like you're the size of a bean walking around. Again, in The City, this is just because it's an easy reference. In The City, there's a crosswalk. And I dropped my bee all the way down to the ground. And I walked clear across the street. It took forever. And the graphics that they had for the ground were very fuzzy, but they weren't like pixelated necessarily. They were just like blurred with texture. It was interesting. It was an interesting way to do it where they didn't have to have these insanely huge resolution graphics, but they added this like blurry color on top of decent texture. It was interesting.
I feel like some of those areas were so like low quality, and then like I said at the beginning, when you're like learning how to fly, it was beautiful.
Mm-hmm. And like the greenhouse looked so good. Well, not the greenhouse level, but the tropical area.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
In the main game, when you go to the like tropical area, that was so nice. And
you're
like,
only in there for like a small time.
Yeah, I know. But it's still like they have these little areas that look really good, and then there are other areas that there's like nothing. Absolutely. It's flat.
The amusement park
was super cute. Yeah.
Well, it was cute, but it almost felt empty.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I feel like with the trash, I'm not asking for like a whole lot. I get it. It's not supposed to be this big game, but like they could have had a little more like areas for you to explore in the trash.
Mm-hmm.
It's an amusement park. You would think that there would be trash.
There was a spot where you were going under the garbage can, and it would have been nice if under the garbage can there was a wad of gum or just something random, and it doesn't have to make any... It doesn't have to have a purpose just to have that random bit to it.
It felt like the outside was huge. I feel like if they had just cut back on some of that, because it seemed like flying over long distances got very boring, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, you still had to collect flowers, and I feel like that's what they were trying to aim for, but I feel like it would have been received on my part a little bit better if, well, this area is small, but I have so much to explore, there's so much to look at, or, just... Not just, there's all this grass.
You were very limited to how high you could go. You were very limited to how far in any direction you could go. Like, there was very clear boundaries. Once you started hitting those boundaries, it was like, oh, I'm caged in, you feel that.
Yeah.
Another problem that I had when I was playing was the bee... The bee character that you are, there's not much for animation. So it's basically just like a 3D model, but like as you're flying, you maybe have one animation for flying fast and one animation for not flying fast. And that's it. And when you turn, there is no side view of the bee turning and flying a different direction. It's just the camera rotates, but the bee stays in the same position on the camera. And it was kind of frustrating on a gameplay level, but like from a graphics point of view, there is no dynamic to your bee character. It's more in how the camera moves than the bee itself does. So that was an interesting way to go about, movement.
Interesting.
But
we'll go with that.
Again, I'm still saying it's not bad. Maybe an A is high, but I think I'm gonna leave it an 8.
You gave it an 8 of there? You gave it a 7.
No, I gave it an 8. I gave it a 7 for story. I gave it an 8 for graphics.
I'm fine with 6.
Yeah, no, it's to each their own, you know?
Yeah.
So let's get to the meat of this game, the gameplay. Flying. Flying is very, very, very difficult.
I started this game. I was the one who started playing first.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting there trying to figure the controls, and there I am flying around like an idiot. And I'm like, maybe I just need my axis inverted. So I go in there, invert my axis.
Still terrible.
Flying around, everyone's like, man, Kaylie's terrible.
Well, okay, so from my perspective, I'm watching you do this, and I'm like, it can't be that hard. Like, there's no way this flying is that hard. I'm like, she's gotta just be being weird about this. So then you hand me the controller. No, it's that bad. Like, it legitimately was a terrible way to...
Several times I got motion sickness. Like,
I mean,
I wasn't sick, but like you
could feel the dizziness.
There was a few points in time where I legit could feel myself getting nauseous. Like, it was terrible.
Yeah. So to talk about the flying mechanics as best I can without having you guys experience it yourself. To fly forward. Okay, so you're a bee, right? And you have 3 dimensions you can fly in. You have full 3 dimensions to be able to move. To move forward in space, in your depth, you can push up and down on the left analog stick, and that will fly you forwards and backwards to some degree. Moving left and right on the left analog stick just kind of pivots you in a left or right direction, but doesn't necessarily turn. To turn, you use the right analog stick, which moves the camera, and the camera can move left, right, up, and down, and that is the inversion that you can set. You can invert the X and Y axis on, or did I say that right? X and Y axes on that joystick. So depending on how you view the camera, the problem is when you turn left to right, there is no turning. So you have to use the camera angle to shift your point of view to actually make good turns. To move up and down, like vertically within the 3-dimensional space, your height value, if you will, you have to either use the R and L triggers to be able to fly up, and gain altitude, or fly down. And the other way to do that is to point your camera up and fly forward. So once, like, the tutorial kind of walks you through that, and your brain, when you first start playing, is like, okay, this makes sense, but they did it all wrong. Like, that's not how they should have done it. What they should have done, in my opinion, is had a button push for flying forwards or gaining speed, and having your left analog stick actually turn your character left and right, and maybe have some sort of pivot up and down as well with the left analog stick, and then the right have it be solely camera, nothing else. And I think that would have changed a lot as far as your perception of how to fly. However, again, in my opinion, once we got the hang of it, it wasn't too bad. But man, that first half hour, I was critically
sure even play the game.
Exactly. Critically thinking maybe this isn't the best game to play for a full podcast episode.
My thing was, we would trade off the controller, and I realized it was only a partial few seconds to get used to it, but we would have to get used to the controls again after passing off the controller.
And I think
I was not fully used to the controls. Like, you're right, you get used to it, but it's still, I couldn't do the racing aspects of the game.
Oh no, and I think the racing aspect was a completely different problem. But the flying mechanics were really bad. Once you got used to it, it got better, but even then, it was still really bad.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
And I think from my perspective, I think, again, those changes that I suggested, I think that would help. But also, when you invert your camera, you expect the inversion to be on your left analog stick as far as movement also, and that's not the case. So when you invert your camera and then you start moving and you're moving the character's not inverted with your camera. It's confusing, to say the best.
Yes. It's sad. I was sad that this game. Yeah.
The collecting the pollen was kind of the primary goal of the game. You could find flowers, and some flowers, when you're in your quote bee vision, would have better ratings or like better pollen usage or something. Some of them are more rare than others, and when you're in that bee vision, you can see the rarity depending on the color of the flower. Not the color of the physical flower, but the color that the flowers are like emanating while you're in this bee mode. But when you're not in bee mode, they just look like regular flowers, whether they be blue, purple, whatever, it doesn't matter. But they all have these like little rings that you have to hit, and that's how you collect the pollen, is by hitting those little rings. And sometimes you are hitting the rings when you're not even close, and other times you're going through the rings and it's not registering, so that didn't work very well. But I mean, that was like the main gameplay. What were the mini games? Do you remember them all, Kaylie?
You're fighting hornets and wasps.
Right, yep.
You did the motion for directions, like rhythm dance.
Oh, yeah, the dancing direction, yeah. And that was more like Simon Says. So, like, the bee that you're talking to would do, like, up, and then you would do up, and then it would do up, left, and then you'd have to do up and left. You know, exactly like the game Simon, not Simon Says, the game of Simon, where you have to do, you know, ba ba ba. You get it.
Yeah. Not really a mini game, but there was the having to pick up larvae.
Oh yeah, and that was funny too. Like, they introduced it as this mechanic, but you only really used it for that one part of the game.
Which would have been fun if you could have picked stuff up as a bee. Little things leaving around. I don't know. Or
yeah,
like if that was a few missions or something, like you need to go move larvae around. Okay.
Yeah, that would have been neat.
Feed the larva something, you know? Then there was, again, not an actual mini game, but there was like one instance where you actually had to sting a problematic child or something like that.
Oh yeah.
And then again, not really a mini game, but like eating sweets or like crawling around on stuff, which was super cute, by the way. I loved walking on the walls.
And actually, the animation for crawling around on stuff was pretty well done.
Dropping off the pollen to the like hanging.
Oh right, and then there was the race.
Oh yeah, the race. Oh man, I hated the races. I almost blocked it out. Thanks.
So the races were kind of annoying too, because the goal was you have the pollen rings. The races, you have these green rings, and they're typically like they're always used during story mode. The races are used when you're trying to chase another bee down, or you're chasing the drone, or you're trying to follow the bee or the queen bee to the hive or whatever. But anyway, it's usually used to help the story progress. I mean, you could activate a race without it being a story driven, but they had it primarily in the story mode. You had to fly through the checkpoints, which were these little green circles that you had to fly through, and you could miss, depending on the mini game, you could miss, like up to 5 or whatever rings. but you also couldn't get too far behind the bee or whatever you are following with. So if you fell too far behind, you had to start over, or if you missed too many rings, you had to start over. The problem with this is your bee goes insanely slow, and it is really hard to control said bee. So the race aspect was insanely difficult, even playing on easy mode. It was so frustrating. We would even get to the finish line, and all of a sudden, like, wasn't it when you were playing, Kaylie? You made it all the way to the end of the finish line, and the game was like, nope, you're too far behind, and made you start all over again.
They were too far behind.
I think they were.
Got forward, and I got too far away from them. It was bad.
It was a broken mechanic, in my opinion. I can't even fathom what they could have done to make this better. Maybe make the target that you're chasing a little bit slower. There are like boost icons that you could collect along the way so that you could hit your boost button, but I don't think that they added enough of those to be able to consistently boost to keep up. I think the rings were too small. I think if they made the rings bigger, it would give you more of a directional sense, and maybe bigger and further apart. I don't know.
Well,
it's just there was so many things. Yeah, agreed. If they had a base control system that worked,
because obviously part of it was doable, and if the controls were, if the flying mechanic was more fluid, it would have been a little more easily achievable to do these. Thankfully, they had a skip option. I don't know if we would have beaten the game.
I agree.
They didn't have the skip option.
At least not in the time that we did it. I feel like I would have gotten the races eventually, because, eventually you'd learn the course, and you would learn that you have to be boosting all the time, and you have to make sure that you actually get the boosts to begin with. But it would have been very tedious to try and win these races. But yeah, like you said, luckily, after you lose like 3 or 4 times, they're like, do you want to skip this? And you're like, yes, please.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The fighting minigame, we kind of talked about a little bit. You're usually fighting like a wasp or something, and they would give you X or Y to push, and you have to push them in the correct time. Like, you have a time bar, and then you gotta hit the buttons when the time comes. And I would get mixed up with X and Y all the time, even though X was triangle, and I tried so hard to represent X as triangle in my mind, and I still couldn't get it. But it was at least doable, except for the like boss wasp fight that was.
I still think you were supposed to.
You were supposed to lose in that? I don't know.
Yeah, lose. I wonder if there would have been more buttons if we had chosen hard mode. Because, there was no medium. It was either very hard or easy.
Yeah. And we picked easy, and it was still really hard.
I should go through and play again and see how it is on hard.
Yeah. I'd be curious to know. But yeah, I mean, there wasn't very many mini games, but they overused them.
Absolutely.
I think they could have added a few more mini games, or maybe even removed how many times you did those mini games. Like the battle thing, I kind of was sick of by the end of the game.
Yeah.
The race thing, half the time we would get a race and we're just like, nope, let's just fail 3 times so we can skip it. We can skip it faster. I liked the hunts that they had in there, where like they'd say, oh, there's a flower lady, and then you would have to hunt down the flower lady. And I liked those. I thought that was fun. I wish there was more of that, because it gave me a reason to explore the world.
Would have been a lot more fun if they were like, if you had to go, like, there's so many I need you to go get some cherries. Now you need to find something sweet, like candy or ice cream or something, or, something where you had to go looking for actual items or something. I don't know. Just give you something more to do than collect pollen, I guess.
Also, they had the sting feature, for the one, like, side quest?
I know.
why not have that be a problem where, you know, oh no, like an alert starts going off and there's kids playing around the beehive, and it's your job to go and like sting the kids so that the kids don't play near the hive, you know, or whatever. Granted, again, going back to technicalities, honeybees, if they sting, they're dead. Like, that's it. So they're not going to sting unless they absolutely have to. So from that aspect, it's not reality. It's not as bee simulation as the game claims to be.
I thought there was going to be some kind of stinging mechanic with like the bear, because they seem to have like this image, like focal point on this bear. I thought for sure maybe we would have to sting the animals or something. You can't even sting the animals.
Yeah.
So...
yeah, I think that was a failed mechanic that maybe they were still working on, and they had to just get the game out. To be
honest, this entire game, it looks like they focused so hard on the visual, like the beginning of everything, and then the cutscenes, I guess, and then the rest of it was just like, it's fine, just send it to press. I don't know.
Yeah, I get it.
You know, I feel like it was, they focused on like two things and they're like, the rest should be fine.
I don't know anything about Big Ben, the developers for the game, but it very well could be that they're a small company, a small group doing this. And if that is the case, I understand. However, I feel like the game may have been unfinished and could have been polished up a little bit better. Maybe tested with a bigger group to make sure that it's a playable, better, easily picked up and played. For example, if I were to pick up and play this game again in like a week, I would have to completely relearn the controls. Like, it would just be a nightmare trying to pick this game up. And we've had games that we've played like Abzu, ABZU.
Yeah.
That game was also three-dimensional, but you were in the water. And I feel like they had those mechanics down just fine. So there's no reason why they, you know, any game developer should really have problems with the 3D space. I think they just did it the wrong way. And, it goes back to testing. If they'd have tested it better with a bigger group, I think they would have caught it and been able to fix.
Right now is $40.
Ooh,
that's a lot of money for this game, in my opinion.
Yeah,
and I told you while we were playing this, I said this is the kind of game that we play on thrift shop game reviews.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah.
And if it was just a thrift shop game, I think it would be a little more like, because I was so excited. When I saw this game, I was like, oh, this looks adorable. We need to play it. I waited for it to go on sale, like wherever it was I bought it. I don't remember where I bought it, but I waited, and I feel like still buying it on sale. It was still too much. Like I was really disappointed, honestly.
You know, what's funny, when we first fired up the game, there are save slots, and you can have up to 3 save slots, I guess, on like one user profile. But the save slots have icons of a bee, a stag, and a dragonfly. And when we were first starting it up, I legitimately thought that you could play with like 3 different types of bugs. And I was excited for that. Yeah. And then we finished the story mode, and I go back to that screen, and I'm like, oh, they're just save profiles. Yeah, they're not even...
I would have understood, especially after just talking about the price, I would have understood the price point if it was that, because, the bee story is not that long. Now, if they had 3 different... Was it 3, you said?
Yeah,
if
3 different bugs. If they had that
many different characters with their own mini story, I can understand why this game would be as much as it was.
I absolutely agree. Can you imagine how much fun it would have been to have just been a dragonfly?
Yeah.
And follow the life cycle of a dragonfly? Like, I would totally do that. Like, it would not... I don't feel like the game mechanics would have changed at all. No. It would have been the exact same terrible flying mechanics that they had.
I think it was a stag, but at first I thought it was an ant. But to walking on the ground, they already had that down with the bee. Mm-hmm. Like, you can still walk. Yes,
and you had a bunch of tunnels that you could walk through.
We full thought we fully thought that was part of the game, that you could play as a different character. And yeah, that was a little disappointing.
Yeah, I was disappointed too when I found out that we couldn't.
It's like the game Bee Simulator, I realize we're not an overall yet, but I feel like we had high hopes. It makes you have high hopes because it at first looks beautiful and it is very charming, but like I feel like that gameplay ruined this game.
Yeah. Yeah, it did make it tough. Now, there was a multiplayer aspect to it as well, where
That was fun.
you and one other person, you could do a split screen. And yeah, I enjoyed that. They had 3 different levels, if you want to call them levels, that you could explore. There was the greenhouse, there was the city, and
it was like wilderness.
Oh yeah, the like waterfall, woods.
The water. We thought it was windmill. It was like watermill.
Oh yeah, that's what it was, watermill. And those I feel like were really well detailed, like especially the greenhouse. The greenhouse looked so good. There was this cute like area for weddings. There was balloons all over the place.
As silly as this is, I realized the game had to have some kind of reason why you're playing it, but like us exploring around and stuff is kind of what I expected for Bee Simulator.
Mm-hmm.
You're flying around being a bee.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad that kind of hit what I was hoping to get, but like it still left you wanting more, you know?
Yeah. And it was too bad that they didn't include these areas that are already mapped out into the main game. Like, how hard would it have been to say, yeah, we have to fly into the city because, or have your character get caught by the bee, scientist and taken to the city where you have to navigate and find your way back home, or, there are things.
Well, even the frogs and the rats, and like you could kind of get in trouble with the spider, but like I fully thought that you should avoid the frogs, they could eat you. Oh no, it didn't matter, they were just there.
Well, and there was even dialogue where they were talking about bees getting eaten by frogs.
Yeah.
So like, why wouldn't frogs be an enemy in the game? It doesn't make any sense.
I hate to say, because we didn't play the hard part, but maybe that's part of it. I don't know.
So what'd you give it for gameplay? Did we talk about this already?
I don't know. I gave it a 5 out of 10.
I give it a 6 out of 10. Again, it was...
You get used to it.
It was playable.
If it was me, if I had picked this up, say for like $5 one day at a garage sale, and I had that much hard time playing it, like at the beginning, trying to get used to the controls, probably would have put it down and walked away.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, we continued because we really wanted to beat this game. Also, it was cute, and there were so many bee puns. But
there was a lot of bee puns.
I don't know.
Yeah, I would have enjoyed this more if... There's so many ifs.
So much potential. I had I had different not that I expected them, but like hopeful expectations, like, oh, they could do this,
Mm-hmm.
This could be amazing. It's such a cool concept. It looked great, and I severely disappointed.
Yeah, it could have been a lot better. And you can see the direction that they're heading, but I feel like they had a lot of really good ideas, but they didn't quite get it there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, they didn't quite...
It felt like a rushed project.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Well, let's move on to music. I can't remember the background music for the game, which is kind of a good thing because it means it wasn't annoying, but it also wasn't memorable. So
I don't remember the music specifically, but I do remember thinking that the music matched the game. Like, I don't know how to properly explain it. I'm kind of poor about explaining what it is I like about music sometimes, but I felt like that the music did match the game for what we were doing.
Sure, yeah. So
That
like it
said-
fit the mood of what you were
Yes,
doing at the
yes.
time. Yeah.
Because you're bees and it's naturey and it's it's nice. My kind of problem was the bees did not buzz. There was no bzz, bzz, and the voice acting was terrible.
Yeah, the voice acting was really bad. That was probably the biggest issue that I had. You could tell that the lines were being read and they were just like one off. Personally, I have no idea how bad voice acting could possibly be, simply because if you were to read a script and you say the script is like, oh wow, this is amazing, you would say it like that in your head, like, oh wow, this is amazing. Okay, now I want you to say that again, but with emphasis, okay? Oh wow, this is amazing. Instead of like having it sound like a script. Like, I don't understand why this is a difficult thing.
I feel like that this would have so much more impact if they just cut the voice acting, made it text, and just have the buzzing or some kind of a bee sound effect, not people talking.
Yeah, I agree.
Like the queen talking, I don't know, it all seemed that, and like some of the bees had accents. Why?
Yeah, funny accents. Yeah, that's true. They didn't all sound the same.
They weren't all the same accent. They were just like some of these bees were German, or I don't know. Which, I don't remember the
I get
accents,
it.
but it was, or even if maybe like different colonies or different, like the hornets and the wasps had different accents. But no, it was just everyone just was whoever was in the office that day. Hey, read these lines, and we'll call it a day.
Yeah, that is what it sounds like too. Like, again, going back to reading the lines as a one-off, it legitimately sounds like they walked up to somebody's office and said, hey, read these and we'll record it and throw it in our video game. Like, that's what it sounds. It just sounds like, oh wow, this is amazing. And it's very, it's just very, it wouldn't have been that hard for them to just find people who can put emphasis into lines. Like, it's not that difficult to do, but they didn't do it. And some of the voice acting isn't terrible. Absolutely. But a lot of it is, and a lot of it sounds very, like, monotone, you know.
The only one voice actor that kind of did his job was the Fly.
Oh, yeah, the Fly was amazing.
That little section was kind of cute. You get accidentally sucked into this, like, kitchen in a building, and you have to escape. And you have to ask the locals for help. Well, the locals happen to be flies.
And the kitchen was nasty, too. There was flies all over the place and, like, slime on the floor. And
not sanitary.
And then...
that was cool.
Yeah, it was. And then the Fly was like, yeah, you're going to have to go through the sewer if you want to get out. And your bee is just like, oh... great. And then you're flying through the sewer and it's like slimy and gross, and your bee is like, it stinks really bad, and that poor bee.
I kind of felt like I didn't like the RB specifically.
Yeah.
I think the RB would have been, which I realize there would have been no story, but I feel like it would have been better if RB had no personality and it was just you, the person controlling the bee. I
kind of feel that way with the game too. Like, if they were to have it be like a first person view instead of actually having a bee on the screen, I think that would have enhanced things a little bit better. But yeah, I don't know that I felt the same way about RB. Like, RB wasn't a very likable character.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then I kept thinking, because the bee keeps disobeying. Well, she doesn't really disobey, but like it doesn't want to do what the queen's doing, blah blah blah, and like it's the queen. There were no repercussions. You're not doing what the queen asked you to do. Well, I'm gonna have to go tell them, and they're gonna tell you not to do anything but your job. Like, you mean like what I was supposed to be doing? You're gonna make me do what I was supposed to do? Like, it would have made more sense if they were supposed to, like, we're gonna have to just remove you from the hive, or if you
we're gonna have to cut your wings off.
And then, well, then what's funny is you actually find a place for your hive to relocate, which was not nearly as beautiful as it was
I know.
in the tree. But then the queen forgets who you are. You literally saved the hive, and she does not know who you are anymore.
That's right. She's like, are you Paula or are you Jennifer? Yeah. Oh, I don't know. I have millions of daughters. I don't know your name. Really?
It was... Well, and like, when I think of the queen, you think of like a beehive just full of bees, which I realize we're playing a video game, but there was like not that many bees in the hive.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
So, yeah.
Anyway, music.
Well, okay. Lacking in the bee sounds. Just
Agreed.
not even like
sound effects as a whole, I think, was kind of lacking. There was a handful of sound effects when you're walking through. You can like hear the people talking, which, by the way, the humans talking was exactly like the Sims. They're just like blah 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 blah. Where the bees actually spoke like English or whatever language you're from. They had like a list of languages you could pick.
Right.
There was sound effects in the game as a whole, but it just wasn't very good. Like, the voice acting wasn't very good. The bear, like, when you stung the bear, he would just kind of like, "Arr," and like, he would just make the same noise over and over again. There was no, like, variety.
I think we did the sound effects better.
I agree.
We were doing the whole time, we were doing our own little thing. We must have been very tired that day. Eating the bear eating.
Oh man.
I feel like if they cut out the voice acting, it really would have met the aesthetic they were going for with the beat game.
Yeah, I agree. I think if they'd have so many things that this game could have done. Yeah. But yeah, I agree. If they'd have just cut out the audio for the voice acting, I think it'd have been just fine. And it's not like there was a ton of reading anyway. Plus, you get to pick the main character's name, so they don't even say the main character's name throughout the entirety of it, where it is in the dialogue. So again, if you just read the dialogue, it would have made the experience a little more personable.
What was our bee's name?
I don't remember.
We didn't want to type it in.
It was like Basket or something.
Oh, Biscuit.
Biscuit, yeah, Biscuit. With the double E. Biscuit.
Every time we said the word bee, which apparently was a lot, I just, inside I was like...
I know. It's too easy. It's too beesy.
It's too beesy.
So, what did you give it for music?
I gave it a 4 out of 10.
Ooh, yeah. I gave it a 6.
Really?
Yeah, I mean...
I didn't even remember the music.
Well, and see, but that was like, it wasn't annoying to me. Like, that was the positive there. Like, it wasn't good, but it wasn't awful. I didn't have a problem with it.
I will bump it up to a 5. I feel like after talking about it, I can bump it up to a 5. But yeah, I don't think it deserved anything more than a 5.
That's fine.
But to each their own. Yes, I know. I realize. I just, I don't know.
So overall, I gave it an 8 out of 10, which is a little bit higher than I think it deserves. But I have to say, I actually had fun playing it, but I don't think I could have played it longer than we played it. Like, once we were done, I'm done with the game. Like, I might play it just for, like, on Twitch, because it's an interesting game to see, and it would be fun to kind of poke at a little bit. But overall, it's really hard to pick up and play because the controls are so tough. Yeah. I don't really care at all about the story. The mini games were not super fun. It's really, more than anything else, it's fun to just fly around and be a bee. Like, that is the highlight of the game. And that, from that point of view, it was fun. I enjoyed that.
We forgot to mention the little, like, hats.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can... there's unlockables. What was it? There was skins that you could unlock.
Yeah.
Like different bee patterns.
That was about it.
Hats. Oh, and then the trail.
I gave it a 5 out of 10 for overall.
Sure.
Yeah.
It would have been. It could have been so much better.
Yeah,
it's too
it had
bad.
a lot of potential, and it kind of just fell through. I'm sad. I was really excited because it looks cute. It looks adorable.
Yeah, it really does. And if you guys came here listening to this because you're curious about playing Bee Simulator, find it on a good deal. Because I don't think this is worth the full, retail price, mainly because the game is not super awesome. It's fun to experience, but it's not something
$5.
Yeah, it's not something that you're going to want to play long term. It's not something you're going to want 100%. It's I don't know. I think watch a YouTube video, enjoy it for what it is, and know that the controls are absolute total garbage.
Yep.
And if anyone from Big Ben is listening to this, I'm really sorry. We've completely destroyed something you've put so much work into, and I hope that you've seen that we legitimately found things that we'd enjoyed about this game, but there was a lot of mistakes that, or not necessarily mistakes, but a lot of things that could have been improved upon, and I think that it fell flat in a lot of these areas. Don't get me wrong, I had fun playing it, but if it was just me playing it on my own, like you were saying earlier, Kaylie, if you'd have picked this up at a bin deal where it was only like $5 or $1 or whatever, you would have put it in, the controls would have been way too difficult, and you just been like, nope, well, that was a good try, and just dropped it and let it go. So, that would be my takeaway from it. Like, those controls have to be top notch. If you can't get those controls down, nobody's going to want to play your game.
I would have liked this game a lot more if the controls were better.
Agreed. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think a lot of our complaints, a lot of stuff that I had problems with all along the way, the mini game, the racing mini game would have been so much easier if the controls were better. Yep. Just overall navigation of everything. Like the highlight of the game is to fly around and be a bee, and that is difficult because the controls are difficult. And again, if a developer is listening to this that developed this game, that's really what it boiled down to for me, is that the biggest problem of this entire game is that the controls did not work. At least for the Switch version. I can't speak to any of the other versions, but the Switch version, I can't. The controls are so difficult.
We got nauseous.
Yeah, we did. We did. You do get used to it, but man, it takes some time. And because we had already set to play this game at this time, we were dedicated to make as best of an effort as we could to play this game and get it completed. And I'm glad we did. But if we weren't that dedicated to it, I absolutely would have just swapped out the game and played something else that would have been easier to pick up and play. This would have been a good
thrift shop game review.
Agreed. Yeah, I absolutely agree. It would have been fun watching us struggle through it, because it was. We were kind of raging there for a while when we first started playing because the controls were so difficult.
Yeah.
So, yeah. My total was a 35 out of 50.
Mine was a 26 out of 50.
And I think that's a 60 out of 100?
61.
Oh, okay. So yeah, that is a 61 out of 100. That's a D minus.
Yeah, well, like I said, with the controls, if the controls were better and this game got a C, that would have been acceptable. I can see that working. You know what I mean?
I think if the mini games were easier or not quite as stupid, it would have been better. A C. Like there are a lot of aspects of gameplay that could have been improved upon that would have made this game just a little bit better. But I mean, really, I can strongly say to the average person, probably don't play this game. it's not worth the frustration unless you're like a hardcore B fan or something. Like even then you might get annoyed because I feel like some of the B facts may be incorrect. So from even that perspective, you might be upset.
Yeah.
But there are cute things about the game, and maybe play it or watch a video on it for those cute things. But other than that, I wouldn't play it.
Yeah,
I wouldn't play it.
Maybe if you get it for $1, if someone gives you $1.
Here's $1. Take this game from me, please.
Oh yeah, that's
man.
too bad. I had high hopes for this game.
And we gave it a good try. I mean, we did beat the game. We legitimately finished the story mode, and we played all 3 of the multiplayer levels. I mean, we did, as far as I can tell, we did about everything that the game had to offer, aside from maybe hard mode. But after playing easy mode and it being such a pain, I didn't want to play hard mode. But
yeah.
All right. Well, guys, thank you all so much for listening to this podcast episode. Next, on November 1st, we hopefully will be talking about Final Fantasy VIII. Until then, we have Zap Chats on the 15th, and you can listen to all of our previous podcast episodes over at ZapNight.com. If you guys want to watch me struggle through this game on Twitch, let me know. Send me an email, because if I get enough people wanting me to do it, I probably will. So, let me know, and we can explore that
together.
Yeah, exactly. If you guys want to hang out with us on Discord, our link is in the description. It's something like discord.gg/fattybees. So if you want to check that out, you're more than welcome to. Also, all of our episodes are over on YouTube, youtube.com/ZapNightGaming. And thanks all for listening, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Bye.